Ms. Kelly, thank you for accepting our invitation for this interview. Your country has supported the Kosovo Libraries Week for years now. You've been invited like a special guest for this year. Before you received the invitation, what was your knowledge about Kosovo's history in general?
That's a really good question. It was very, very minimal. I knew a little bit about how the United States had taken some refugees during the war, and some other kind of light historical knowledge, but not a whole bunch. And getting the invitation prompted me to read a lot more and try to understand a lot more.
What was your focus on your speech here in Kosovo Libraries Week?
It was on oral history, and it was on oral history as a tool for community engagement in libraries around Kosovo and around the world, really. What I do in New York City at the New York Public Library is organize adult programs around collecting people's personal stories and using that as a tool to really bring the community into the library and connect people in person. So I talked a lot about that. I talked a lot about how important it is to share your story as a way to explore your personal and your cultural identity.
So where is Kosovo in this process in collecting oral histories?
So Kosovo libraries are really in the beginning stages. There's no work whatsoever being done right now in libraries in Kosovo. There have been a lot of authors and a lot of independent scholars who have collected oral histories and shared them in various ways, mostly through text. So this was a really, really interesting week for me because I was presenting oral history really for the first time to a lot of people who are working in libraries as a tool to engage their communities.
So why Kosovo? It has not started this.
So it's actually a new concept in libraries worldwide. The New York Public Library started it just very recently in 2013, and so it's one of those things that people are gradually learning about. Regularly, I get emails and phone calls from people all around the world asking me how to start an oral history project in their library system. And so when I received this invitation here from the U.S. Embassy, it was exciting because it's the first time I've presented in another country on collecting these oral histories. So maybe one day Kosovo and the New York Public Library system will be working with the same model, and that would be an amazing thing.
Do you consider Kosovo rich with oral histories that can be collected?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that's really struck me in being here is how ready people are to share, and not just about their experiences with the war. People might assume that an oral history collected here would be the theme, but I'm encouraging people to share all kinds of history and memories, and everything from talking about local food to talking about what it was like to go to school here, to sharing experiences, sharing thoughts and about the future of Kosovo.
Have you heard any of those stories?
So actually, yes. We did a demonstration interview with one of the people that I've been working with at the U.S. Embassy who's from Kosovo. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions that I asked him was to tell me a little bit about where he comes from. And he talked a little bit about the legends that he learned in his village growing up, and then how he learned them, which was from his father as a way basically to keep it interesting on the farm during the day as he was doing the various tasks on the farm.
So beside libraries, who should cooperate to collect those oral histories?
So that's a really good question. I think it's all about the public. I think it's all about making sure that the library builds a trust with the public, and that people understand that when the library asks to collect their stories, that they aren't just participants, that they're helping to build these projects together with the library. I think that that's one thing that made the Oral History Project so successful at the New York Public Library, and still makes it so successful, is that it's not just one oral historian like me coming in and collecting stories. It's the whole community together building a project. And so I think that that's a huge point to make about these types of projects here.
Considering your experience, can you tell us more about your methods that you use there in New York's library?
Yeah, so the first thing that I do is I reach out far and wide to volunteer interviewers in each neighborhood. Now, each neighborhood in New York City is kind of like its own little city. There are different cultural norms and values, and there are different demographics and different kind of shifts in demographics. And so these are the types of things that make each neighborhood very distinct. And so knowing that, I reach out to different community organizations, different groups that are already really active in the community to find volunteers to conduct interviews. And we've had over 300 people around the city conducting these interviews. These are all people who could easily share their stories as well. And they go through a 2-hour training. And the one main thing that I teach them about collecting oral histories is to just step back and listen. That the most important thing is to not ask too many questions, but just to be really a vessel for people's stories. And then they go out and they collect. And we've had over 1,000 stories collected around the city so far.
Do you have any books or something that talks about Kosovo's history there?
I read a book before coming here called Balkan Ghosts, which was of a little bit of historical significance around the old Yugoslavia as a whole. And so there were a lot of bits and pieces of Kosovo's history in there. And then I also read, trying to remember the name of it, The Book Club of Kosovo, about a woman who came to Kosovo with her husband after the war, right after the war, and worked with a group of students studying English and shared their stories as she heard them about their experiences during the war. And so those are my experiences with Kosovo history books, but there are plenty of others that I'm really looking forward to reading now that I've been here and have talked to people directly.
Okay, can you tell us what should libraries of Kosovo do in this aspect, in collecting oral histories now?
That's a really good question. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with that. I've put forward a bunch of information to people, and I guess that my hope, and I hope that this is their hope too, is that libraries are active participants in getting their communities throughout Kosovo to participate in collecting oral histories. And then another hope is that the National Library supports that work. This is what happens at the New York Public Library. We have a larger research library that we call the Schwartzman Building. And within that building, there's a research collection that houses all of these community projects. So just thinking about how libraries here could work in the same way, where you have a lot of different communities collecting the stories, and then they become part of this larger collection that may live in Pristina at the National Library, maybe even at the university, maybe a couple of other places, but just having those central locations too.
You have visited other cities too. What do you think of their libraries there?
So it's been so fascinating. There are a lot of similarities. I've noticed that, one of the first questions that I ask people, just because this is my interest, because I kind of coordinate community programs for people, is what types of community programs do you have? And people have had just very long lists. We went to Prizren and we went to Peja just yesterday, and I also saw the public libraries here in Pristina. And all of the public library staff have a really strong interest in getting to know the people who are using their libraries. Just a couple of examples of that. there's a database that they're developing in PEA that is collecting these different statistics on the people who are using their library. And such a valuable tool, because how do you know what types of community programs to offer if you don't know the people who are using your space? And so to have that, I was really excited to hear about that. And then the other example, here in Pristina at the public library here, they are wondering about what type of hours they should be open. That was a question that they asked me, and I thought that that was really reflective of also thinking about their user and what types of hours they should keep the library open for the people here. So it's very, very user-centered, and that was one of the things that was most exciting to me.
Okay, what are your impressions now for Kosovo?
I have so many impressions, and I guess that an overall impression is, first of all, I really want to come back. So I'm already in my head planning my trip back. And that's because the people here have been so curious and so warm and welcoming. And there's a strong value in hard work and kind of understanding how to develop better systems and programs for people here. But there's also a strong value around relaxing and socializing, and in those social conversations also some of the most amazing kind of ideas have come out of them too.
Ms. Kelly, thank you for this interview.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.